Although I've never formally sat down and compiled what I would consider to be my top 10 things that I like most about the BBC Micro, there are at least two that I know would make it into that list. The first is Mode 7, otherwise known as Teletext mode. It's the default setting for a Beeb when you first turn it on, and there's just something wonderfully iconic about it. It's the mode of many a graphical text adventure. It's surprisingly versatile in terms of what it can do, and for a BBC Basic programmer, it's incredibly economical with memory, using a modest 1K for the screen and leaving the rest to you to do with as you please. It also supports teletext programming for the sadly now defunct Ceefax, which is why it was included in the brief that the BBC provided to Acorn, and it also made the Beeb a great Prestel terminal. The second thing that would make it into my top 10 list, of course, is the greatest game ever developed for the Beeb, Elite. Even if you've never heard of a BBC Micro, the chances are that you would have come across Elite because of its runaway success and its subsequent ports to many other computers and consoles, as well as the more recent updated version, Elite Dangerous. The original Elite used a clever split-screen technique, with a monochrome Mode 4 for the space navigation occupying the top two-thirds of the screen, and Mode 5 being used for the 4-colour dashboard. So, what has any of this got to do with Mode 7? Surely you couldn't run Elite in Mode 7. Could you? Should you?
Yeah, but your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think if they should.
Well, those are the questions that Mark Moxon and Kieran Connell decided to put to the test, and the result is the wonderful, nostalgic madness that is Teletext Elite. The original idea for trying to get Elite running in Mode 7 came from Kieran and the Bitshifters following the development of their mind-bending Teletextr technique, which enables line drawing using Mode 7's sixels. Sixels are a set of predefined 2x3 pixel characters which are used in Mode 7 to construct graphics. Typically, the kind of graphics you can produce with sixels look fairly blocky, and they're not always the easiest to animate effectively. But then came the Teletextr demo in 2017, and suddenly the world changed. The graphical sophistication that the Bitshifters showed that you could achieve in Mode 7 meant that, at least in theory, similar techniques could be used to make a teletext version of Elite. Mark Moxon, as many of you know, is famous for having annotated the entire source code of Elite, and this put him in the prime position to see whether or not the existing graphics routines could indeed be adapted. Not only did he get it to work, he went a step further and has produced a version of Elite that is not simply a demo, but a fully fledged, fully playable edition, and in his words, it has a charm all of its own and really hits the 1980s nostalgia button. Well, I couldn't agree more with Mark, so without further ado, let's dive in and take a closer look. The first thing to admire is Mark's faithful recreation of the loading screen and the famous spinning Cobra Mark III. While it may be noticeably lower resolution than the original, it's still quite remarkable that it even works in Mode 7 at all. And for all that, it looks pretty decent. I mean, it's very clear to any player of Elite what it is, and in fact, even if you've never played the game before, you can tell it's a spaceship, spinning in 3 dimensions. Of course, this is still squarely in the demo space at this point, the 8-bit equivalent of a cutscene, you might argue. Impressive to look at, but not very interactive. But Mark didn't stop here, not by a long shot. Once we get into the game proper, we're presented with a familiar but different screen showing us docked at the Lave space station. In this view, Mode 7 comes into its own. There's a crispness to the Mode 7 font, and a reassuring sense that we are indeed playing a game on a BBC Micro. Not only that, but the text here is more colourful, which is a lovely side effect of being in Mode 7, which of course supports the full 8-colour palette. These colours actually enhance the buying and selling screens, making commodities, prices and units stand out more distinctly. Where things become much more teletext, and in my opinion much more fun, is when we dip into the market prices screen, because Mark has included an exquisite Easter egg here. Pausing the game, pressing X and then resuming turns the screen into Galfax mode, a delightful tribute to Ceefax. And it shows us on page 131, the original share price screen in the Ceefax of yore. Flourishes like this are what really make the game pop for me. Another Teletext touch comes with the galactic star charts. In overcoming a limitation of Mode 7, namely having the movable cursor inadvertently turning text into graphics as it passes over the top, Mark chose to implement a reveal function which switches between the graphical map and the text descriptions of each potential destination. It's a really elegant solution to what might otherwise have been a significant limitation of the game, and it also harks back to the reveal features of Teletext that were used for obscuring the answers to quiz questions or the punchlines of jokes. So, in my opinion, top marks for this one. But what of the main game? Well, if we exit the space station, you're instantly transported into a three-dimensional, fully interactive teletext world. The planet of Lave is here, and pivoting around you can see the Lave space station too. We can launch into hyperspace and engage in dogfights, just as in the original game. The only difference is that we're doing it all in Mode 7. What amazes me most of all is that the performance of the game is practically unchanged. The graphics might be lower resolution, but it still feels like you're playing Elite, and there really is no obvious degradation of performance. You can run trade routes or hunt down pirates and bounty hunters just as you would in the original game, but with the added wackiness of doing so in a mode that was originally never really designed for such sophisticated animation. In my opinion, whether or not this started out as a humorous what-if from Kieran and Mark, the result is a very playable game that has genuine appeal. And by being in Mode 7, it almost feels more BBC Micro-ish than the original, and that perhaps is the highest compliment I can pay it. So, if you want to immerse yourself, Tron-like, into the world of Teletext, head over to Mark's website, there's a link below the video, and download it and try it. It's hugely enjoyable. I'd also recommend checking out the full BitShifters demo of the original Teletextr routine, as the video is jaw-dropping stuff. For now, though, this has been Bits and Bytes. I hope you've enjoyed the episode, and you'll join me for the next one in the series. But until then, goodbye.